right, welcome everyone. I am Melissa Skiffin. I'm a disability advocate here at Achieva. Thank you for joining us. We are happy to have you all here. We are especially happy to have Miss Alana Carter Donaldson with us this evening. Alana is a project scholar with the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium, and she's going to be presenting tonight on the intersection of race and disability project. And Achieva is actually a founding member of the Western PA Disability History and Action Consortium. So welcome again. If you already heard me say this, I apologize. I've said it about 4 times now, but if you wouldn't mind putting your name and email in the chat, I just want to make sure that I have contact information to reach out to everyone after, share any video, any update, or anything like that. And also so you guys have my contact information. So without further ado, I will send it over to Alana. Alana, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melissa. And good evening, everyone. And welcome to this presentation of the intersection of race and disability project. Today, I'm excited to share with you an overview of this amazing project that was created by the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium. And I'm excited to introduce 5 trailblazers from Western PA who have lived at the intersection of race and disability. And throughout this presentation, you will hear me describe certain pictures on our slides for our viewers and listeners who are visually impaired. So on this slide, there is a picture of the WPDHAC logo in the shape of the state of Pennsylvania on a white, yellow, and blue background. So before I actually get into the project, I wanted to share a little bit about the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium. It is a mouthful, so I will refer to it more commonly as the WPDHAC. And the WPDHAC was founded in 2015. And it's a community-based archive that preserves and honors the historic struggle of people with disabilities to attain human and civil rights, and shares the lived experiences of today in order to promote community access, participation, and equal opportunity. We have a lot of partners that we work with, but our main 3 are the Senator John Heinz History Center, the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University, and of course, Achieva, who is our fiscal sponsor. Our funders are the PA Developmental Disabilities Council, the Edith L. Trees Charitable Trust, FISA Foundation, the A.W. Mellon Foundation, and we also have some individual donors who contribute about $40,000 annually. The WPDHAC also has a steering committee that is made up of individuals, the Senator John Heinz History Center, the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University, Achieva, Community Living and Support Services, which is known as CLASS, the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Southwestern PA, known as NAMI, as well as Inside Our Minds, the Peel Center, Pennsylvania History Coalition Honoring People with Disability, Polk State Center, Transitional Paths to Independent Living, known as TRIPLE, and the Disabilities Option Network. I would like to once again highlight our partners, FISA and Achieva, because without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring this program to you today. So if you're unfamiliar with the FISA Foundation, their mission is to champion equity, justice, safety, and inclusion for women, girls, and people with disabilities, combating systemic racism that impedes progress for these populations in Southwestern Pennsylvania. And they can be located at their website at fisafoundation.org. Achieva's mission is advocating for empowering and supporting people with disabilities and their families throughout their lives. And of course, you all are familiar with Achieva, but their website is www.achieva.info. So I want to thank them again for their support. To begin talking about the intersection of race and disability, I thought it would be a great idea to give some data points to paint a picture that often escapes conversations concerning BIPOCs, specifically African Americans who live at the intersection of race and disability. So the first stat is that 6 million African Americans in the US live with a disability of some kind. And according to a 2020 report from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, Black Americans experience higher rates of disability compared to other races and are employed at a rate of 20.5% compared to 31.3% for people of other races. And we can see just by looking at those percentage numbers that there is a disparity there. Black or African American students with disabilities are more likely to receive disciplinary removal than all students with disabilities. And the last stat is very important in the wake of the social justice movements around police brutality. About 30 to 50% of all people killed by law enforcement officers are disabled, according to a study by the Ruderman Family Foundation. So on this slide, there is a magnifying glass with a question mark in the lens and a blue background. After hearing those statistics, we can see that African American stories make up a large part of the disability community stories. But they're not often put to the forefront. So to address this, advocate and activist Valissa Thompson coined the hashtag disability to white because she was thinking the same thing. Thompson, who's a Black woman who is also disabled, created this hashtag when she came across a Twitter conversation that discussed an article on disability and beauty. Another advocate named Alice Wong suggested that the article left out women of color. And in responding to Wong's comment, Thompson was inspired to coin hashtag disability to white because while BIPOCs, again, represent a large part of the disability community, their stories and experiences are often untold or overlooked. With this observation, the WPDHAC sought a grant from FISA to engage a project scholar to document and share the history of Western Pennsylvanians who live at the intersection of race and disability. And they did this to expand the historical record and advance equity in disability rights. Through this effort, the project will contribute to systemic change through community engagement that explicitly connects this history to the contemporary struggle for racial equality, civil rights, and social justice, and supports advocacy for equitable policy and practices. And on this slide, there is a picture of a small stick figure with words surrounding it in a circle that say class, race, education, sexuality, ability, age, gender, culture, language. Throughout this project, we explored the following questions. The first one, what do we need to know about people of color who live at the intersection of race and disability? How have people of color led efforts to establish disability rights? How has race affected access to treatment or services? And how have people faced interpersonal or systemic racism and ableism? We were very lucky to have our partner, the Heinz History Center, serve as a model in the undertaking of this work, as they've already done some stories on some very exceptional people, such as Herb Douglas Sr., who was the first person to successfully use a seeing eye dog. And Herb Douglas Sr. is the father of the Olympian Herb Douglas Jr., and they're both Pittsburgh natives. On this slide, I have a picture of Herb Douglas Sr. with his seeing eye dog. He is seated and he's petting his dog. And I was able to locate this photo from an Ebony magazine archived issue from February of 1967. So to make sure that we were executing this work with precision, a timeline was developed. And the project actually began in January of 2022. And beginning in 2022, I first met with our advisory committee, which was constructed of individuals who have worked with organizations active in the disability community. And some of our members of the advisory committee also live at the intersection of race and disability. I met with them to strategize and get input on how to approach this project. Through May of this year, I began to research and document the stories of our inaugural class. And there are 5 members in our inaugural class. I did a combination of archival research using collections like the University of Pittsburgh Special Archives. I visited the Carnegie Library, the Heinz History Center, and other repositories. From then, I also conducted and recorded interviews with the subjects and those who knew them, as well as people who were experts in the particular subject area. In June, we met with our advisory committee again to provide updates and get input. And from July through this month, I have been writing the stories in article form, 3 of which are actually published out on the WPDHAC website. And we're going to continue to roll those stories out through December. And the project will actually culminate in December. This leg of the project will culminate in December with a project evaluation that will be done by the executive committee of the WPDHAC. There is another branch of the project that will be continuing through 2023, where another 7 individuals will have their stories told. So be on the lookout for that as well. So as I mentioned, there was a huge process in approaching this project and seeing it on its way to completion. And again, it entailed me really diving in there, researching and creating short biographies on each of the potential subjects, working with our advisory committee to create a selection criteria. And I also took a poll with our advisory committee to gauge to see, who they thought would be great candidates for our inaugural class. I then had to construct oral history questionnaires and conduct these interviews with our class subjects and the people who were related to the subject areas that I was talking about. And then there was another part where we had to work to disseminate this information through multiple platforms, such as social media, through Facebook, through Twitter, and reach out to other media organizations in Pittsburgh, newspapers, etc. And then, of course, share with audiences just like this one. To date, we have had, this will actually is our 4th presentation. We aimed to have 5 presentations for our, to represent, of course, our 5 individuals that we produce interviews on. Our first presentation was the Envision conference, which is run by the Western Pennsylvania School for the Blind, and that was in May of 2022. We presented with the Pitt Diversity and Inclusion Forum in July of 2022. We just had a presentation last Wednesday with the Heinz History Center. And then, of course, here we are today with Achieva. And we're hoping to present with Temple University in December. So hoping that we'll have some more information on that in about a week or so. And again, please check out our website to see when that event will be coming up. So I now have the honor of introducing you to our inaugural class. And our first person that we did a history for was Miss Florence Reed. And Florence Reed was born in 1944. She's still very active. I have a picture of her on this slide. She is wearing a purple hat. She is seated, she is smiling, and she's also wearing a pretty snazzy purple and orange and white and red dress. So Ms. Reed is the co-founder of Working Women with Disabilities, and the acronym of that organization is known as 3WD. She graduated from Miners College, which is now known as the University of the District of Columbia, and she graduated with a degree in speech therapy. She later enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh, where she studied counseling, and she received her master's degree in counseling education. Ms. Reed taught in Pittsburgh Public Schools for 7 years and is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Inc. Ms. Reed acquired a disability as an adult, but she had already been well acquainted with many people within the disability community through her previous work in speech therapy and counseling. So as she began to collaborate with her colleagues, Ms. Reed noticed that the presence of minorities was rare in many of the organizations. She also noticed that she was now dealing with 3 parts of her identity that made her subject to discriminatory practices. She was Black, she was a woman, and she was disabled. So in the 1990s, she and her friend, Randy Rubin, came together and set up meetings for women with disabilities where they could talk about the issues that they faced in the workplace. Ms. Reed and Ms. Rubin would officially found Working Women with Disabilities in 2000 and create a mission to provide employment support and education for all women with disabilities. The organization also did fundraisers to help women with disabilities with rent, food, and resources. And on this next slide, I have a newspaper article that I was able to locate, which discusses a dinner that they threw in honor of Linda A. Dickerson, who was a disability advocate and a Carnegie Mellon University trustee. Ms. Dickerson actually passed away in 2020, but this is just an example of one of the types of benefits that 3WD put on to assist women in women who lived at the intersection of actually gender and disability, but all women who are in the disability community. So through perseverance and addressing a void needing to be filled for women in the disability community, Florence Reed has affected the lives of many people across Western PA with her work. Her advocacy and persistence have set the stage for a new generation of advocates who are navigating intersectional challenges. And she gave a lot of wisdom during our oral history interview. But one of my favorite quotes that she said was, quote, "Know who you are, what you want, what has to be done, and how you're going to go out. And the best thing I can tell you is there's a saying, walk softly and carry a big stick," end quote. So that was Florence Reed. Next, I would like to introduce Marika Moore and Rika's Hearts. And Marika Moore is a young lady who was born in 2001, so she just turned 21 this year. And her parents, Ron and Cicely Moore, created the fundraiser called Rika's Hearts. There is a picture of Marika on the slide at the top right. She is seated and smiling. And then there is another picture at the bottom right of a group of participants in the family's annual walk run for epilepsy. And they are all wearing purple tie-dye t-shirts. So Rika's Hearts was founded in 2013 by Mr. and Mrs. Moore after Marika had double brain surgery. The Moores were overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from their community in Washington, PA, when Marika was in the hospital, and they decided that they wanted to give back. They founded Rika's Hearts to raise money for Marika's medical treatment and also to raise money for members of their community for needs spanning from medical treatment to even supporting youth sports teams. One of the ways in which they raise money for Marika's treatment, as well as for other initiatives in their community, is by hosting an annual family fun run slash walk for epilepsy. And the most recent one was actually just this past July. One of their goals is actually to establish a scholarship fund to help children from Washington, PA, who want to attend college. So on this next slide, I would just wanted to give you some perspective on the intersectionality of African Americans living with epilepsy. So according to the CDC, there are about 3.4 million Americans who live with epilepsy, and about 578,000 African Americans suffer from the illness. According to the Epilepsy Foundation, African Americans are more likely than their white counterparts to be diagnosed and more likely to experience medical emergencies related to epilepsy. With medical emergencies come mounting hospital bills. And while we do not always know or hear about the struggles that come with trying to pay hospital bills and how a diagnosis of epilepsy can change both the quality of life for an individual and their family, Rika's Hearts brings visibility to what self and community empowerment looks like. So I would be happy at the end to share Cicely Moore's email if anybody would like to learn more about Rika's Hearts or to get involved with the annual family fun run and walk, or I would be happy to also make an introduction as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I would like us all to take a moment to imagine post-Civil War Pittsburgh in 1868. Many of the things we know and love about our city don't exist yet, including integrated schools and places of worship, even though Pittsburgh was a staunchly abolitionist city. Imagine now what lack of resources there were during this time for someone who was disabled or someone who was deaf. What I just described to you was what this young man on my slide, Henry Collins Bell, experienced. And on my slide, I do have a picture of Henry, courtesy of the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, and he's standing in a pose, dressed in clothing from the late 19th century. Henry C. Bell was the first student of the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. He was born in 1862 to Martha Caroline and Robert W. Bell. He was a resident of the Hill District and in his later years, a resident of the South Side. One day in 1868, Henry showed up with a friend who was German to the Third Presbyterian Street Church, which was then located in downtown Pittsburgh. And he showed up there to attend Sunday school. In the 1860s, this was an all-white Sunday school. And of course, Henry, being a young Black boy, caught the attention of the school administrator, whose name was Joel Kerr. According to sources like the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Kerr was willing to let Henry stay, even though it was a white school, and he went to talk to him. He didn't know that Henry was deaf, so Henry did not respond when he went over to him. Thinking that the young boy might cause trouble, the teacher inquired why Henry was not at the Black Sabbath day school, which was next door. And Henry's friend explained that Henry was deaf and that he couldn't learn anything there. And in actuality, the Black Sabbath day school had actually turned Henry away. Kerr allowed Henry to stay, but Henry's mode of communication through facial expressions caused the other children to laugh. Seeing Henry as disruptive, Kerr dismissed the child. However, Henry, at the tender age of only 6, would not be deterred, and he came back the next Sunday through a classroom window. Kerr would continue to make Henry leave whenever he felt that he was distracting the children, but Henry continued to come back, and this continued over a course of Sundays. Every Sunday, Henry would come back. When Kerr felt like he was being a distraction, he would make him leave, but he would always let him come back. Impressed by Henry's persistence and through the insistence of another teacher, the Sabbath school hired a teacher who was also deaf by the name of William Drum. And he then asked the school to find more deaf children to be taught. Henry excelled in Drum's classes, learning to sign his name in the alphabet in 27 lessons. He excelled despite white mothers threatening to take their children out of class because they did not want their children to be taught alongside with an African American boy. When he graduated from the WPDSD in 1880, he became first a wire drawer, which is a person who makes wires by drawing an iron rod through the holes. And then eventually he moved to Wellsville, Ohio, where he worked as a barber. He would also marry in 1892, but his wife's name has been lost to history. Sadly, he died the same year, just 2 weeks after getting married. And so I do notice, I do have a small typo. He did die in 1892, not 1891. Though his life was short, Henry made a huge impact. On this slide, I have 2 articles that I located in the Deaf Mute Journal. And this was a journal that was published in New York. I believe it started in the late 1870s and ran till the 1940s. And these 2 articles mention Henry after he graduated from the WPDSD. So one from 1892, so August of 1892, describes him visiting Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., and mentions his occupation as a barber. And the second from December 8th, 1892, tells of his death. And it also calls for a plaque to be placed in memorial at the WPDSD. And I have not had a chance to actually go up to the school and see if there's a plaque there, but I do know that they do have that picture that I showed you on the previous slide in the main hallway foyer in a display case. So Henry's self-advocacy not only opened the door for the creation of the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, but for other individuals of color in the deaf and hard of hearing communities. Advocate, activist, and Pittsburgh resident Brandy Lee was the narrator that I chose for Henry's story, and she identifies as deaf with a little d and hard of hearing. When I asked Brandy how social justice organizations and communities could better partner with those in the disability community, she said the best way was to, quote, bring us to the table, but also allow us to speak, end quote. And I thought that was a very fitting quote to encapsulate Henry's story, because from the moment that he arrived at the Sabbath day school, his presence spoke volumes, such that it effectuated a much needed change and prompted the creation of a much needed school and organization. So next we have Milton Henderson, and there's a picture of Mr. Henderson seated in his wheelchair at an ADA event. Milton Henderson was known by Skip to many people, and he was known in Western PA for his work with the Pittsburgh Allegheny County Task Force on Disabilities, the statewide Independent Living Council, and the Three Rivers Center for Independent Living, as well as some other organizations that he was a part of. Milton, or Skip, as many people called him, was a resident of the Hill District, and he attended Brashear High School, in the Community College of Allegheny County. Skip was paralyzed in a car accident and became active in the organizations I previously mentioned. And in interviewing Dustin Gibson, a former friend and co-worker of Milton Henderson, I learned that Milton had a passion for activism and that he never hesitated to speak up when he saw injustices and discrimination. Gibson recalled when the two were working for the Three Rivers Center for Independent Living, known as Trickle, one day he and Skip were having a conversation about how inaccessible sidewalks had become when restaurants started to put tables and chairs out for sidewalk dining. Gibson quoted Skip as saying, "We have to fight. We had to fight to get on the sidewalks. Now we have to fight to get down them." In addition, when I asked Gibson about what word he would use to describe Skip, he said, quote, "resistant," end quote. And looking at his career and his advocacy work, Skip Henderson resisted the limitations that are often placed on people in the disability community. And he also resisted status quo by being active in community spaces that were predominantly white and openly speaking of his experiences as a Black man living at the intersection of race and disability. Sadly, Mr. Henderson passed away suddenly in 2019, and his passing shocked both his community and colleagues. However, his legacy as an advocate is still in the hearts of many. And on this next slide, I have a newspaper clipping that I found from 2001 that shows Mr. Henderson being lifted into a van in his wheelchair on his way to an appointment. And this article actually mentions him talking about how hard having accessible transportation was. I'm still actively researching Mr. Henderson's story. And I hope to share more about his advocacy and his legacy in an upcoming article. And I'm looking towards the end of November to be able to have that article out. Last but certainly not least, our fifth person in our class is Marilyn McKinney. And on this slide, I have two pictures of Miss McKinney that were graciously shared with me by her son, Brian. Miss McKinney was raised in Detroit and was a resident of the Stanton Heights neighborhood in Pittsburgh. Her work with the Pittsburgh Public Schools included ensuring that PPS was compliant with the regulations of the Individuals with Disabilities Act, known as IDEA, when it was first rolled out in the early 90s. She was also the branch secretary of the Pittsburgh NAACP until her death in 2004 and served as president of the Greater Pittsburgh Alliance of Black School Educators. Ms. McKinney's daughter, Ebony, was diagnosed with lupus at an early age and was granted a wish by the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Seeing that most children participating and selected in the program were not children of color, Ms. McKinney founded a group called African Americans for Make-A-Wish. According to an article in the Post-Gazette, which reported her death, African Americans for Make-A-Wish's goal was to, quote, locate children who might qualify to have a wish granted, anyone younger than 18 with a life-threatening illness. I really wanted to highlight Ms. McKinney because sometimes we forget about the parents in the story who have led the charge to make a better future for their children. On our next slide, there is a picture of a proclamation that was given to Ms. McKinney by the Allegheny County Council shortly before her death in 2004, and is a testament to how she was respected, how much she was respected for her work. I was honored to be able to interview both her son, Brian, and her close friend and colleague, Ms. Ellen Esteman, who each gave me their take on her legacy. Brian said, quote, to me, it is an idea. You never stop fighting for the community. And she knew that there was so much more work to do. And if she was going to go out, she was going to go out doing something that she loved. And she was going to go out helping her community because that's what she did for 30 years of her career. So I think it's just that you never stop giving to the community. There's always more work to do, end quote. Ellen Esterman, who was her friend and colleague, said, quote, "I think her legacy is that she really wanted to see the Black community succeed. I think that is her legacy. I think she wanted the Black community to be seen as people with dreams and people with hopes and people who wanted economic success and people who wanted to be able to go to college or to a trade school to become whatever it is they want to do." So I just introduced you to the inaugural class of the Intersection of Race and Disability Project. And again, their names are Florence Reed, Rikus Hartz, Henry C. Bell, Milton Henderson, and Marilyn McKinney. Again, this is just the beginning and the work continues. We want to share more stories, and there will be an additional 7 that will be shared by the end of 2023. So all of the people we have just learned about have made a huge impact on Western Pennsylvania through their advocacy and their commitment to creating change. So now I want to talk to you about some of the social justice themes that were explored throughout these stories. On this slide, there's an image that has a group of words such as justice, freedom, health, dignity, equality, and human arranged in a wordle with assorted colors. As I researched this class, the social justice themes that I uncovered were education, access to affordable medical treatment, non-discrimination in the workplace and disability employment, and transportation rights. But when we talk about social justice, we must remember that the roots of many of the movements are heavily embedded in the civil rights legislation of the 1950s and 1960s. On this slide, there is a black and white photo of Thurgood Marshall, George E.C. Hayes, and James Nabrett Jr. standing in front of the Supreme Court after their victory in the historic case Brown versus Board of Education. Brown versus Board of Education, which was decided in 1954, was a catalyst. The ruling in the case of Brown versus Board dismantled school segregation, deeming it unconstitutional. And while the case was brought to the courts to challenge the segregated schooling of Black children, Brown would set the precedent for legislation such as the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which addressed protections for students with disabilities. Section 504 of the Act is a federal law designed to protect the rights of individuals with disabilities in programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance from the department. Brown versus Board also gave way to the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, again known as IDEA, which was established in 1990. IDEA is a law that makes available free, appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities throughout the nation and ensures special education and related services for those children. When we look at disability employment, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 laid the foundation to make it unlawful to discriminate against individuals in the workplace based upon their federally protected class. On this slide at the left, there's a black and white photo of Martin Luther King Jr. and President Lyndon B. Johnson at the signing of the act in 1964. And on the left side of this next slide, there is a picture of the Reverend Jesse Jackson speaking with activist and advocate Justin Dart Jr., who is seated in his wheelchair. One could argue that the provisions in the Civil Rights Act gave birth to Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, known as ADA. Title I reads, employment prohibits covered employers from discriminating against people with disabilities in all employment-related activities, including hiring, pay, benefits, firing, and promotions. Covered employers include private businesses, educational institutions, employment agencies, labor organizations, and state and local government entities with 15 or more employees. So, of course, that's a lot of employers who fit that classification. Other acts that followed in the footsteps of the civil rights era legislation would be Part 37 of the Transportation Services for Individuals with Disabilities Act, which states reasonable accommodations must be provided on public transportation for individuals with disabilities as a provision of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this means that buses, public transportation must have chair lifts, adequate spacing for wheelchairs and other medically necessary equipment, clear signage / braille for those with vision impairment, and proper audio accommodations. And on this slide, I do have a picture of a chairlift extending from a public bus. So all the legislation pertaining to disability rights that we just visited was created by previous social justice movements to address and remediate civil rights. Knowing the history, the impact that these movements had on subsequent legislation should deepen our awareness to the unsung heroes who may have been active in fighting for these causes. It should also allow us to recognize that partnerships are valuable tools and that when used with the best interest of all in mind, they create lasting and effective change. And I just want to reiterate that partnerships and collaborations are what is needed to transform legislation, change policies, and secure equal rights for all people. So to end this presentation, I want you to walk away with a few things. First, that the struggle for disability rights is ongoing. Second, that it's important to know the history of those who came before, both locally and nationally. And it is our hope that the intersection of race and disability project brings greater awareness. And we want you to get in touch with us. If you have a story to share, or you know someone from Western PA who is living at the intersection of race and disability and has been instrumental in advocacy or change, we want to hear their story. We want to highlight them. And here are the ways that you can reach out. You can visit us at www.wpdhac.org. You can send us an email at info@wpdhac.org. You can reach out on Facebook, just look up WPDHAC, or you can give us a call at 412-204-7199. And I want to give a big thank you to Achieva. I want to give a thank you to Melissa and Nancy for putting this event together. And thank you to all of you for your attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions.